Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Danny and Carl with Get Wisdom with our continuing channeling series. And today we're going to turn on the Wayback Machine and go back to our first channeling subject, which was Dwight D Eisenhower, who was the President of the United States back in the late 50s, early 60s. And he was also a very famous World War II general, the general in most people's minds, and largely responsible for many of the successes towards the end of World War II. So you will have seen a bio somewhat adapted for this series of questions that we're going to be using today prior, and I'm going to also reference some reading from Mae Brussels' book to kind of set the scene for the questions that we're going to be delving into today. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you especially, Carl, for doing this channeling series with us. It's really appreciated. All your effort and work in this area has been invaluable.
Well, thank you, Denny, and appreciate your being here and being a pioneer and a true seeker and an enlightened being. And this is what we need right now, more people who are awakened and curious and want to know the deep truths and really understand how things are. And it turns out it's rather important because there are some very mixed things going on and they have dire implications. And it's always been thus. When you think about that period when Eisenhower came up through the ranks and became that leader, both in the military and the civilian arena, at that critical turning point in history, that was a very scary era. And those who lived through it will not hesitate to share that view. The world could have gone dark and stayed dark. And it was only through divine intervention and people who could still think independently, who were able to use that divine support to turn the tide. And this happens again and again through history, that we come right up to an edge where we can go off a cliff unless someone is awake and gets enough awareness and then seeks an answer. That gives an entree for the divine realm to step in and participate, maybe wholly behind the scenes with no one realizing it. Maybe someone just kind of saying a prayer because that's how they were raised and that's just sort of their personal practice and they don't give it much thought. That could be one of the most important of the factors in their success. But here we are again at a time where the world seems more stable in some ways, but quite chaotic in others. And that's always been a recipe for disaster eventually. Mm-hmm. And you can die in a big conflagration, a world level war, or you can die in a local act of terrorism and societal decay and neglect and a kind of a degrading of law and order and personal conduct and propriety and morality, when more and more is tolerated of aberrant behavior and so on. And it's the latter, I think, we're more involved with at the moment. That could change tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Yep. The winds of war keep coming.
Yes.
And we flirt with it, and more than flirt with it. And the military's out there doing things as we speak, always. It's a state of constant war somewhere now.
Yeah.
So we can learn a lot from the people who've been involved in the world stage.
Yeah. That reminds me of one of the questions that we had. I think it was with Kaiser Wilhelm, but it was kind of like, it was one of the either the fifth or sixth question of the six questions, and I was trying to tease out an answer about another worldwide war and how those worldwide wars come about, and kind of just flesh out the whole thing. And the answer that we got from my impression of the answer was that, what are you talking about? World War III is already happening. We're already in the middle of it right now, and it's like the cabal, the dark alien agenda, warring against the population of the world in a very different way than what we normally think of it. It's not the nation state against nation state. It's against the rulers against their subjects, basically. So that this weaponization of the environment is not just, it's not allegorical. It's the real thing. It's really happening. This is what's in play right now for what we're led to believe so far through the channeling series is the alien agenda is their final solution for humans. So it's kind of staring us in the face, and I think that answer was given to us to kind of shake us out of our slumber. Is that, what are you talking about? We're sitting around wondering about whether World War III is going to start or not. It's already at your doorstep. It's already ongoing, and so it was a little sobering.
Well, it's quite sobering, and I always have mixed feelings talking about these things because it's so harsh and brutal a message. But if we don't wake people up and tell it like it is, then there's no point in being here. There's no point in being in this lifetime if you're not helping the cause,
right?
Because that's why we're all here. But it's very much the case. If you just look at the things that are being done to our nation in the U.S. here, we've felt lucky for a long time because we've never been touched by war in a official capacity. We've not been really bombed in a serious way, other than Pearl Harbor, which was serious. But
yeah, you have to go back to the Civil War, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right. So we had the Revolutionary War, which was quite brutal, more brutal than people are taught today.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since then. And so we've escaped all the subsequent wars for the most part. But the reality is quite different, because even though we don't have planes coming over and dropping bombs and causing destruction, we have this relentless series of natural disasters that are orchestrated by the extraterrestrial presence and using humans recruited from our ranks and in service through this secret space program. And this is the kind of thing they do for their training.
Right.
So they'll come in and cause giant wildfires. Well, this has a huge toll.
Yeah.
There was more than 1 million acres. I think it was 1.5 million that burned in the western U.S., southwest area in 2017.
Yep. And there's
huge damage.
And there's even debate about the actual death toll in some of these fires, where the official numbers and when compared to the evidence of some of the boots on the ground investigators looking at some of these sites, they're going, wait a minute, there's no way something like this could have happened and it only had these few deaths, And so there's people out there trying to ferret out the truth, but it's not easy because they're not getting the kind of cooperation that they would get like we would expect in the old days, with the different government agencies coming in there and actually giving accurate figures about what happened. And the other thing I need to mention is the weaponization of the environment with the technologies like the 5G that they're trying to roll out, the nanotech that's being sprayed from aircraft allegedly, the Morgellons disease, and what we've been warned in the channeling series, the stuff that's in our food and in our medicines and in all the stuff that we consume, the drinking water, etc. It's a full spectrum, like, to borrow a phrase from Ilana Freeland, it's full spectrum dominance, it's the space fence lockdown, if you will. And it's happening globally, but I'd venture that a lot of the really cutting edge stuff is happening right here in the U.S., where mind control seems to be at the forefront in terms of creating incomprehensible levels of apathy amongst the population, where people could have something staring them right in the face that's blatantly wrong and them acting like it's just another day in La La Land.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, it's an ever-tightening noose. And the analogy I was going to make about the wildfire situation is it's no different than if we had a fleet of enemy planes come over and napalm
Yeah.
1.5 million acres
Right.
of cropland,
Yeah.
and kill thousands and thousands of farm animals. And we had then floods, I think a year ago, um, in which there was a million calves who drowned.
Right.
And, this doesn't even hardly merit news reports.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect, of the complacency. And this just goes on and on. It just bounces around.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems natural because it's Mother Nature and so on. But it isn't natural.
Right.
And it's wrecking up costs as we go. There's economic loss after economic loss after economic loss, as well as loss of human life. And this is worsening. And it's only one of many things, as you're pointing out. So
yeah,
I think that's an apt statement to make, that World War III has started.
Yeah. Okay, so in honor of all this dark news, we're going to revisit with Dwight D Eisenhower, who, as you mentioned, was here, steering things as best he could during a very pivotal time in history, right after World War II. And I wanted to read something that was in this book. It's called The Essential Mae Brussel, Investigations of Fascism America. And she was quite a figure. We actually did a channeling with her as a light being. And so I just want to read a section of this. It kind of sets the stage for these questions, I hope. So this is from her book on page 60. John Foster Dulles was U.S. Secretary of State from 1953 to 1959. Before and after, this public servant wielded tremendous power and influence with the military and industrial monopolies of power and wealth in the world. He was the architect of containing communism. Mr. Dulles confided, quote, President Eisenhower surrendered all his power to me, unquote. And in 1956, he said, quote, don't bother about what the president said. I write what he says, unquote. The State Department was in my hat. Allen Dulles, his brother, headed the spy agency formerly known as the OSS. As long as John Foster was Secretary of State, Allen Dulles had no need to chafe under political control. Both of them placed supreme confidence in their personal judgments. They were completely trusted, able to act at will, and shielded from any unpleasant consequences. Adolf Hitler declared war in 1941. By 1942, Allen Dulles was moved to Switzerland for the purpose of rounding up and importing German scientific specialists of the United States. 2 years before the war ended, or its fate was decided, the United States was making arrangements for Nazi scientists and arms experts to come to our democracy, for which the boys were fighting and dying at that moment. From 1945 until 1952, the U.S. military brought over 642 alien specialists. That's the ones they know about. Actually, the number's probably greater. It's over 1,000, I believe. And their families from Nazi Germany were known collectively by the code name Paperclip. German missile and rocket experts, munition makers, war experts were carefully selected and placed into aerospace programs and armament and manufacturing. And what she didn't mention here, but which I knew that she knew about, was also people like Joseph Mengele were also under that program, probably a more secret version of that, because they were very interested in the German studies in mind control. So that kind of sets the stage for I hope, for the questions that we're going to be asking today. I think at the time that we did the first channeling with Eisenhower, we were, we didn't know how far to dip into the well, so to speak, and we were a little bit cautious with our questions in some respects, and so we still have some of that same frame of mind here, but we're just going to try to go a little bit deeper, given what we've learned since that first channeling.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. Eisenhower was someone, I think, universally respected. Not everyone loved the man, not everyone liked his politics necessarily, and some other aspects of his decisions and so forth. And in a broad arena like being the leader of the United States of America, and then representing America and the world and helping to deal with a post-World War landscape, you can't make everyone happy. Mm-mm. But his accomplishments, I think, were universally recognized. And the fact he could be that steady hand, that steady influence, and make more good decisions than bad ones, is remarkable. And we owe the man a tremendous debt of gratitude for the stability of the world, relative stability that we enjoy.
And I think it's important to point out is that people like Dulles, the Dulles brothers, were very close to his administration, and they weren't necessarily friends. And we know from a previous channeling session that we did that Allen Dulles was in fact killed and replaced by a reptilian early in his career. So that opens up a whole nother area of intrigue, investigation, and dark knowings about what Eisenhower must have been up against, even without the ET agenda coming into the arena. But that is part and parcel to what was going on with Project Paperclip, because along with those scientists came their affiliations with at least the reptilians, and probably the reptilians and the Arcturians.
Well, we continue to be naive.
Yeah.
And it's part of growing up, it's part of life with each new generation that comes in, starting from scratch and with so much truth about the world hidden and kept as a secret. It's no wonder that each generation thinks they'll do better. And they look at what's happened and with some shock and horror and vow to never be like those old fogies who made all those tragic errors. And then they grow into their own level of distortion and corruption and involvement with it. And the reality is that the world has been controlled by this extraterrestrial force throughout history.
Yeah.
It's never been different other than the early Garden of Eden days of yore.
It's not new.
So anybody who comes into position of influence through sheer force of will and luck and providence and divine support has a lot to take on, because there's a well-entrenched power structure that's used to getting its own way and does.
Right, and is ready for those people.
Yes, that's right. And they know how to deal with them, and they'll take them out if they need to keep them from being too good an influence on things.
Yeah, or just replace them like they did with Allen Dulles.
Yeah.
And there's plenty. We think he's not a. It's a big club. It's a bigger club than what we expected. At least it's a bigger club than what I expected, because, I did have my suspicions about the guy because of where he was positioned and all the things that he was able to do in his relatively short career. But we found out there was a lot of other political figures like him that were in the same boat. They were killed earlier in their career, replaced by reptilians, and lived out their lives doing the will of the alien agenda. Stalin being another one. So it's something to keep in mind as we go through all of this, as you watch the world. If you've decided that what we're revealing here has some merit, then it's a good thing to keep in mind as you look at what's happening out in the world. It's been very helpful to me anyway. So with that, perhaps we could get started. We have 6 questions today.
All right. I will get in the state of consciousness I need to make the connection. And then I will go through Creator of all that is to connect me to his consciousness, President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, and, from the light. And so he can speak through me and answer the questions we have. And I do this with great care and mindful of the fact that most channelers aren't speaking to who they think. They've been co-opted by imposters. This is a huge dilemma and huge problem in the whole arena. And it's purposefully done to divert them from doing something more useful. So they get hand-holding and largely messages of encouragement and general sort of upliftment. And it's because the powers that be out there who run things understand human psychology. They've been dealing with us for millennia, and they know how to string us along and make us feel good and keep us complacent. And that's the whole game right now. Keep people complacent. Don't stir things up. Don't get them agitated. Don't get them questioning, because that gets messier then. You got to herd the kittens back into line. And so I point that out because there are many voices, many perspectives, most of which is inauthentic. There might be divine truth given, but there's lots of divine truth given through the ages that's rehashed, reused over and over and over, and often by imposters who want to be accepted as authentic and genuine. But those channelers will not be given answers. They'll not be given any deep information about things going wrong. And so it's very deceptive. You think, everything's going to be great. Archangel Michael has given me this reassurance that, the world is improving all the time, and the angels are all helping, and we've got benevolent extraterrestrials, etc., wanting to assist, and whatever this particular story happens to be. And none of that is true, unfortunately. And there is a plan, there's a divine plan. But the divine plan includes cleaning up the mess we have. So we got to clean our room before we can go out and play. It's kind of what it amounts to.
Yep.
We've got to clean up this legacy of the hidden cabal running the world and dragging us into madness over and over and over again. We have to heal all of it, heal our perpetrators. It's a test of us. So we need to get going with it. And so enlightenment is a part of it, and that's what we're after. So I will make the connection to Eisenhower, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you.
This is Dwight Eisenhower speaking.
Thank you for joining us again. In our previous communications with you, you mentioned that when you were president and after you were aware of alien interaction with the U.S. government, there was an information disconnect that became a dangerous situation for you. Is it true that you met with extraterrestrials at Edwards Air Force Base in February of 1954? Did you meet with them after that time? And what transpired between those two meetings, and what was your interaction with Majestic 12, which was the supposed human think tank and ultimate U.S. authority on ET and U.S. government interaction?
The stories that have been circulated and the projections assumed from my whereabouts that match my presence in California at the appropriate time, and then having a missing period where I was out of sight, are all accurate and true. The story has been pieced together over the years, largely by those coming forward to talk about what they knew, either directly or secondhand. And this is a testament to the reality that secrets cannot be kept forever. So it is not unusual to have such information coming forward. And it is helpful because things that are secret are kept secret for misguided reasons. It is a legacy of subterfuge that contributes to political maneuvering and war again and again and again through human history. All of those dark endeavors depend on secrecy on multiple levels to prepare for war. without telegraphing the plans in advance, for the most part, to gain position of power and control indirectly by maneuvering forces into position, and on and on and on. If there were total openness in everything, it would be hard to get such events going. They all depend on secrecy for preparation and to create opportunities to misdirect, misinform, and stir up trouble in ways that are unknown and misinterpreted and attributed to false motives, but inflame public opinion and allow things to get out of hand. This happens over and over again. So it is understandable on the heels of World War II that the world would be in a state of shock in attempting to recover from the greatest calamity in history on the scale it represented. And in that context, having military might was considered paramount by everyone. It was only through military might, presumably, that the world was saved from the reign of terror enforced and orchestrated by the Axis powers in service to the darkest of agendas that were actually leading towards human annihilation. This is the great story of World War II, yet untold. It was always restricted to the Holocaust as an ethnic cleansing exercise, as a kind of side project, hobby-like, when in fact the entire agenda was not only world domination, but world conquest, and then global annihilation. The real orchestrators of the war was the extraterrestrial alliance, acting through the Nazi regime. It was aided and abetted all along the way by sympathizers, and these were ginned up through propaganda and manipulation. Coming in as I did on the heels of my service in the military to command the Allied forces and lead them to victory, everyone had the expectation that with the vanquishing of the foe, there would be a return to normalcy. But this was slow in evolving because of the shocks of war and the massive toll it took on the human psyche. To have to reckon with an alien presence was a further shock to those in my administration privy to this knowledge. I myself did not understand the full implications and was highly suspicious. And that was because of the rumors of some kind of other world presence during the war itself. I knew it wasn't on our side. So I had the greatest of suspicion and reservation when the subject arose that there was a meeting desired by the extraterrestrials to broker an understanding, but looked at this as a potential opportunity to maintain some kind of peaceful equilibrium, and considered this an opportunity more so than a threat. But that was as much wishful thinking as anything else. As a warrior, I knew full well one cannot make assumptions about motives. One must learn directly from experience and interaction directly with one's foes or potential foes to take their measure and make an assessment. I was looking forward to this opportunity with much trepidation because I didn't want to consider the possible implications being as dire as the potential existed for a further extension of the disruption contributing to the world war we had just suffered through. It was in that context, that backdrop, that my meeting took place. This was a brief meeting, but through necessity, because of the need for secrecy. We were certainly not prepared to share this knowledge with anyone. We were seeking a predominant position, and having been victors in World War II, felt this was earned and not only deserved, but needed to be the destiny in order for world survival. So everything was at stake in my thinking to consummate an agreement of some kind so that we could function alongside these alien beings and have a measure of understanding and acceptance for our world role in order to keep the peace and to move things on a more positive direction going forward. That was my burden and my obligation as Commander-in-Chief, to foster some understanding that would grow into some partnership to maintain our dominance and to have a role as peacekeepers. And the advent of having extraterrestrial support was an unknown quantity through lack of personal awareness of the full history of all that has happened over the many centuries with the extraterrestrial interweaving in human destiny. But again, I was naive, and like typical human beings, it is a shock to face this reality in person and knowing they are here and it makes a difference. So I met with these beings and formulated as a representative, not only for the United States of America, but in thinking of my responsibility to the world as a whole, wanting things to be better for all. And this was embraced. And it was done, I know now, as a subterfuge, not in earnest and not with honest intentions. My misgivings were intuitive, and I know this now from my current perspective, that I could sense a sinister implication because of the history here. They were not on our side, and coming forth at this late hour was highly suspicious for me. And that was reinforced with inner knowing. And that intuitive assessment was a deadly accurate one.
Can you fill us in about your interactions with the Majestic 12, which was supposed human think tank and ultimate U.S. authority on ET and U.S. government interaction?